on the ThinkTech radio series on AM 760 KGU, broadcasting across the islands and raising public awareness in Hawaii. Now here's your host, Jay Fidell.
Thank you, Jack Waters. This is Jay Fidell on ThinkTech Wednesdays. We're not going to talk exactly only about tech, although we have what I consider a very tech person with us. We have Charles Djou with us. He's a candidate for Congress. If you didn't know, you should have known. And we're checking in with Charles Djou today in the home stretch between now and Election Day in early November. Welcome to the show.
Jay, thank you very much. Aloha, and I really appreciate being on your show today.
Well, yeah, well, it's great to have you. So how's it going? Tell me about, what life is like as a candidate. You've been through this many times, but I'm sure that people don't understand the rigors of running.
Yeah, it's just a little bit busy for me right now. We're 27 days away from the general election on November 6th. And less than a week away from ballots being mailed out. And that also is something that's a little bit different dynamic today than perhaps when I first ran for office in 1998. And that is about half the people now cast their ballots via absentee vote, either by walking in early or via mail. And, Jay, actually, I think that's a good thing. I think it's a good thing to get more voter participation and make it easier for individuals to vote.
It doesn't make it easier for the candidates, though. They
no.
try to figure out when the magic moment is.
Yes.
They really can't tell.
Yeah, I will share with you that, it has changed the dynamic of campaigning a little bit, that we have absentee balloting and so many people vote via absentee. And that is... I describe it to people as it's sort of the difference between a one-day sale versus a 3-week-long sale at Long's or Costco or something like that. And it's because with ballots going out in about a week, that's when you have to peak. But you have to sustain that peak for 3 weeks.
Yeah.
Whereas, when I first ran for office, 12, 14 years ago, you focus everything on one day. Everything's focused to zero in on just that one election day. But you're asking me about how campaigning is going. Of course, it is very, very busy. Working, 14, 16, even 18 hours in a single day. I am a little tired.
Yeah. What do you do in that period of time?
Well, it's you do anything and you do everything, and no day is the same as any other day. I mean, it ranges from, starting bright, first thing in the morning, sign waving, that odd, unique tradition that we have here in Hawaii. To going out and meeting voters where they are at workplaces. And, some workplaces just start very, very early in the morning. And then, of course, throughout the day, meeting voters, media events such as this one. And very happy that I'm here on with you and KGU. And, another aspect that makes campaigning a little bit different, and I know this is ThinkTech, is, modern technology has made it a little bit different.
Oh, sure.
And that is with the internet, with the advent of social media, Twitter, Facebook, email, people are very connected with their political candidates. And I think today in 2012, the expectation of how rapidly people expect a response from their candidates has dramatically increased. Compared to when I first...
When somebody writes you, they want an answer now.
Yes.
And before they cast their ballot
yeah.
even.
Yes. And the amount of one-on-one interaction is much, much higher today than it once was.
But for Congress, you don't walk the streets as much as for the state offices, am I right?
That's true, but it doesn't mean I don't. I'm really excited and very happy to canvass door to door. It's one of the aspects of the campaign that I actually do enjoy because it's actually meeting people at their homes, hearing what they're concerned about and interacting with individuals one-on-one. And I've been very happy to canvass and go to door in all areas of my district, from Kapolei to Pearl City to Mililani to East Honolulu. Yeah, and each community has its own sort of unique characteristics.
When you go to door, do you actually do you take the information you get, the feelings you get from people when they talk to you, and do you sort of somehow put them in your platform position?
I do, because Jay, for me, being a representative and having the privilege of previously representing Hawaii in Congress, I view my role as not somebody who's here to push a partisan position upon the people. Actually, I view it as the exact opposite, and that is my role and my responsibility is to represent the people and reflect their views and represent them well in Washington, D.C. And going to door, meeting people individually, I get a much better sense and much better feel for how people think, what they're concerned about here. And it's much better meeting people one-on-one than perhaps trying to interface with individuals through a third party like the newspaper, or interface people and try to talk to them via and through, say, letters to the editor.
Well, people are worried, I think. I think I speak for a lot of people when I say they're worried that candidates these days, they build up a big war chest. They hire professionals to make ads. The ads have very little to do with what they really these candidates really are like.
Yeah, Jay,
if you go personally, that's different. That's better. That's the old-fashioned way.
Yeah, and Jay, I will say that aspect of the campaign that you just highlighted here, the incredible need to raise money and to only be able to talk to the public via 30-second sound bites on in the middle of television programming isn't healthy. It is far better, and I certainly far and away prefer meeting a real voter, interacting with them one-on-one, finding out from them one-on-one, what are they concerned about here? How can I address their concerns? How can my representation make their lives and the lives of their family better? And it is unfortunate for me that today politics has become, around our country, but also specifically here in Hawaii,
I think.
That it's been all about 30-second TV ads. And more often than not, those 30-second TV ads are remarkably slanted and very, very negative.
And not helpful.
And it's become, in some ways, a microcosm of what's happening in Washington, D.C. All of these negative, vitriolic TV ads you see flooding our airwaves right now. Us here in Hawaii, we've been affected by it and will be affected by it for the next several weeks. But in some ways, that's the way Washington, D.C. is 365 days a year. It's all about pointing fingers and assigning blame, and nobody want to work together, work cooperatively, and find solutions. And for me, Jay, it is far more important to find solutions than point out blame. There's far more than enough blame to go around in our country, in our community today. And I believe that all this hyper negativity you see going on the TV channels is just unhelpful.
Yeah. Oh, I sure agree. And I think a lot of people do agree.
Yes. And to overcome it, the critical thing to overcoming it is getting people to vote. It's getting individuals to participate and take ownership of your democracy. The problem with these negative
Instead
TV
of being
ads,
a cushion potato, being assaulted by those negative ads.
Right. The thing with these negative ads, the reason they're run, the reason you see these really vicious ads, not just from the candidates, but also from these outside third-party interest groups, from the unions. And, I see a particularly negative ad right now that's being run by the Painters Union. These negative ads from AFL-CIO and whatnot here, which are especially vicious and really bring campaigns sort of a race to the bottom. The reason these ads are run...
You heard it here on ThinkTech.
Yeah.
A race to the bottom.
Yeah. But no. The reason these ads are run is because they work. They work because people aren't paying attention, and people aren't paying attention to what's going on in their government, not listening to the individuals, and just listening in 30-second
We become
sound bites
demographics
here.
for them. We become statistics.
And that's wrong.
Databases.
Yeah, Jay, that's wrong. Our democracy should be about individuals and your families and your concerns, and how does government find ways to make your life better for you? How does government stop all these gigantic problems we have in our country here and really right this ship? For me, Jay, when I look at what Congress and what the federal government is doing today, how we have racked up a $16 trillion, that's trillion with a T, a dollar national debt, I think to most people is mind-boggling. We've increased our national debt by 50% in just 4 years. $16 trillion works out to over $50,000 for every man, woman, and child in our nation. And one wonders, how did we get here? How were we so reckless?
In part, Charles, we got here because of those wars.
Yeah,
which
yes,
cost
in part.
A lot of money, and those wars did not happen in the last 4 years.
In part we did. But I also think in much bigger part we got here because Republicans and Democrats cannot work together. All they're doing is bickering. All they're doing is pointing fingers at one another here. And nobody is sitting here and saying, hey, look, these are serious problems. Let's figure out how we can fix these serious problems, and it's going to take some responsibility and leadership on both sides of the political party, both sides of both political parties. But unfortunately, the reality of Washington, D.C. today is the extremes are dominating both of the parties.
This is a bad time for the country.
And we get what we're getting right now in our Congress. And a lot of what my campaign is about and why I'm running for office here is I think that's wrong. We should change that. We shouldn't have individuals representing us in Congress who are all from the extremes, from the far right and from the far left. I think it is far more helpful to find people in the middle who are willing to work and collaborate with both sides. And I'm very proud of my record that, I was rated.
We're going to get to your record.
Sure, okay.
I'm going to ask you one more thing about what's going on, and that is, how is your war chest doing as compared with Colleen Honabusa? And how is the Dan Inouye effect, if I can put it to that, the Dan Inouye effect affecting this campaign?
Yeah. Well, Jay, certainly. I'm doing okay in terms of finances. Campaign finances is one of those things that, as well as you do, no matter how well you're doing, you can always do better.
That goes for everything in the world, doesn't it?
Well, I'm part Chinese, and as a Pake here, that's something that I really understand. But no, I'm never going to have and will not be able to compete against my opponent in terms of raising the most amount of money. I certainly don't have the backing of the establishment. I'm not part of the old boy network. My campaign is premised on bucking that old boy network, building a two-party democracy in our community. And when you take a platform like that and you're trying to advance change, it's going to be hard to raise as much financial resources from the vested interests who benefit from the status quo. So I'm not going to raise much money as my opponent, but I have better ideas. I have more enthusiasm and more energy. I think that's what counts more, and that's what matters more in elections.
How does that work in Congress, though? You get to Congress, and Congress is like filled with old boys, isn't it? And we'll get to this
right
after the break. You'll have a minute to contemplate that. We'll come back. We'll talk more with Charles Djou, candidate for Congress, checking in with him in the home stretch. This is ThinkTech. We'll be right back. Stay there.
You're listening to ThinkTech Radio's Technology and Media Wednesday with your host, Jay Fidell of Bendit Fidell Attorneys at Law.
That's right. He got it absolutely right. This is ThinkTech. I'm Jay Fidell. It's Wednesday. We're talking tech and we're talking media, and we're talking Charles Djou, candidate for Congress. We're checking in with Charles Djou in the home stretch. So, Charles, for a moment, let's talk about what you've been doing in your life.
Yeah, sure.
You were born at an early age. What happened there?
Well, Jay, like you, I was educated as an attorney. Worked here in downtown Honolulu for a number of years.
I remember Kate Shuddy, wasn't it?
Yes, that's right. I worked at Kate Shuddy. Very good memory, Jay. And then was very privileged to have gotten elected and served in the Hawaii State House of Representatives. Went on then to serve in the Honolulu City Council. Served on the council for 7 years before my election to the U.S. House of Representatives, and was very privileged to have did one term for the U.S. House. And then, of course, in the meantime, have served in the Army Reserve for a number of years, and this past year deployed, did a tour of duty with the Army in Afghanistan. And now I'm back and running for office, and now sitting here with you and enjoying rapping on ThinkTech.
Right, there it is.
Yeah, but
how could you do? You said everything. You gave me the whole biography in like 60 seconds. Yeah. That's pretty good.
Well, the other aspect of my background is outside of practicing law and outside of politics here is that I have and what really enjoyed is teaching. For my years on the city council and in the state legislature, I taught for a number of years, both at the undergraduate level as well as at the law school at the University of Hawaii, and really always enjoyed teaching. But Jay, you and I were rapping during the break. I guess I have a little bit of a claim to fame, and that is there are only two people alive today who have served in the Hawaii State Legislature, the Honolulu City Council, and the United States Congress, and that's myself and Neil Abercrombie. I don't know if that's a good thing or bad thing. I don't know if that puts me in good company or bad company, but I guess that depends on your perspective. Yeah.
That's wonderful. We'll have to ask him how he feels about it. So which is your favorite of those things?
Well, honestly, of course, it's the service in the United States Congress. It was an amazing honor and a privilege to represent the people of Hawaii and Washington, D.C. Every single day that I had the enormous honor of being able to walk on the floor of the U.S. House of Representatives, I got goosebumps. I don't think, for me, this is not something that I'll ever take lightly. Indeed, if I'm privileged enough to go back there again, the day I stop getting goosebumps when you go onto the floor of the House of Representatives and walk by that dome in the U.S. Capitol, the day it stops being incredibly awesome and awe-inspiring, that's the day you need to know. That's the day I know I need to leave.
Can we drill down on that exactly? I keep thinking of Mr. Smith Goes to Washington.
Yeah.
It's a very idealistic approach, and I know you're a very idealistic guy. and I've watched you for at least 10, 12 years now since we met. And I just, can you help us understand what it is when you walk past the dome, so to speak, that gives you that kind of reaction?
Well, it's this amazing experience to be able to walk by that Capitol dome, walk onto that floor of the House of Representatives, and walk by the august statues and Statuary Hall, and walk by those amazing paintings up all around the U.S. Capitol, and to recall and think that these are the same places that some of the most important decisions were made in the history of the United States of America. It is here that we contemplated and decided, what we were going to do about the American Civil War, debating about slavery, debating about whether or not we should declare war on Japan and Germany during World War II. This is where decisions were being made about the New Deal. This is where the great speeches were made by John F. Kennedy and Ronald Reagan. And to think that I was able to for a brief time be a part of that here is an amazing experience.
Yeah.
But, Jay, what I think is disappointing for myself, and I think so many Americans, is that robust, august feeling is being lost today with politics today. That politics today is so small, is so petty, and is so caught up in partisan politics. It does an incredible disservice of how big, how august, and how awesome that Capitol building is.
In a larger sense, what happened in this country that we should be here and this should be happening?
Jay, unfortunately, I think what has happened, it's that politicians, members of Congress, have become far more interested and far more skilled at re-election than being concerned about what's going on back home. They've become Republican congressmen and Democrat congressmen, and they forgot about being United States representatives. And this is actually something I do want to share with all of your listeners and your viewers here. And for all the things that I've done in my career within the state legislature or in the council or in Congress or in the military or teaching, Jay, for me, the most important thing has been and will always be, it's my family. It's my marriage to my beautiful wife, Stacy. It's my kids.
I've seen pictures of your family in the newspaper.
Yes. And my kids have a slightly skewed experience growing up with Dad being in politics. But, for me, I tell folks, but I mean it sincerely, I would far, far, far rather be just an average dad, just a husband to my wife, than a United States congressman. It is far more important to me to have a healthy and strong marriage and a wonderful family than it is to be an elected official. And I think, unfortunately, too much of politics has become this 24/7 theater. It's become more important to score partisan political points on the evening news, on the 24/7 news channels, that has become a blood sport.
Who do you blame for that?
Well, I think it's a combination of it's a self-fulfilling prophecy in the sense that I think I blame the elected officials we have on both parties right now in Congress, but also, unfortunately, it comes from fewer and fewer Americans voting. What's happening here in our country, as well as locally here in Hawaii.
Our state doesn't vote very well.
No, Hawaii has actually the lowest voting percentage in America. And what happens here is that the remaining few who are voting tend to be the most conservative Republicans or the most liberal Democrats. It's the far extremes of both parties who are continuing to vote. And what happens then is the middle, the center, the individuals who want to find a common sense compromise, like myself, unfortunately, are beginning to drop out of the electorate. And the more those individuals drop out, the more power and influence the extremes have. And then the more power and influence the extremes have, the more the middle continues to drop out. And it's a vicious cycle that we see going on in our country. But Jay, I'm running for office because I'm here to say that that's wrong. We need to reverse that. We need to change that. We don't need the extremes dominating our government. We need the center again. And I'm standing up here running as a candidate for public office saying that, it makes sense to have the common sense and makes sense to have the middle work together for the common good of our country, not for the good of your political party.
I'm so glad you said that. That's my own theory. Is it's the common good that we're missing out on, and we're into self-interest. And running for office, perpetually running for office and always trying to advance your own political career, that's self-interest.
Yes. Yeah.
But trying to actually help the common good, that's a much better thing.
Yes.
And I think we've kind of lost that.
Yes, no,
Lost that.
that's exactly what we've lost, and it's so far from the principles established by our founding fathers, and that's sad, that's unfortunate, but it doesn't have to be that way. You can change it by voting. You can change it by voting for change. You can change it by good candidates standing up, arguing and articulating those points, and then the people backing them. And that's what my candidacy and my campaign is all about.
Yeah.
And Jay, maybe also, though, I can share a very quick story with you
Sure.
and your listeners and your viewers. During my service in Afghanistan, when I was privileged to serve over there with the Army, and for the record here, Jay, there's nothing I miss in Afghanistan. I am so happy to be home here in Hawaii. During when I was privileged to serve overseas over there, I had the opportunity to interact with the district governor in the area to which my brigade's operations were conducted. I was deployed to Kandahar province in southern Afghanistan.
You were a lieutenant or a major?
I was a major. Yes, I served as a major. While I was talking to this district governor through a translator, I remember him sharing with me that in his country, for not hundreds of years, but thousands of years, power was held by and wielded for the benefit of whomever held the most amount of weapons. And that's the way life was for thousands of years. And I remember this district governor telling me, Major, I now understand why you Americans and why the American Army, you place such a high priority on democracy. Because for thousands of years, I, as a district governor here in southern Afghanistan, would have never cared about infant mortality rates. I would have never cared about how many children are learning to read and write. I could care less about the water quality conditions, about the local villagers. But it is because of democracy that now, as a district governor, I pay attention to these things. It's because power is not necessarily and exclusively wielded by and for the benefit of whomever holds the most amount of weapons, but by average villagers. And so when average villagers are worried about whether or not their mothers, their wives are dying from childbirth, that's something I'm beginning to pay attention to. And he said to me, now I understand why you Americans so jealously and so vigorously promote the belief in voting and democracy. And what I was struck by was I was ashamed to tell this district governor in southern Afghanistan that in my home state of Hawaii, less than 40% of the individuals who are eligible to vote actually vote. And Benjamin Franklin, when we established our wonderful and amazing country, the United States of America, I remember there's this famous quote that at the end of the Constitutional Convention, a woman asked him, Mr. Franklin, do we have a republic? And his response was, ma'am, you have a republic as long as you can keep it.
I remember that quote. Often make that quote. Yes.
And unfortunately, I see what's happening here today is average Americans are taking for granted what so many other individuals around the world so jealously protect, fight, defend, and die for.
So how do you fix that? To me, it's a lot. We've lost it because we didn't learn it in school, stopped caring. We haven't connected our own obligation to the way the government works. Yeah. And this could be a one-way street. And if you, Mr. Smith, if you get to Washington and you have the unadulterated opportunity to play a role in trying to fix that, how do you fix it?
Yes. Jay, it comes down the way it's always come down in our country to individual Americans standing up and saying, this is wrong, this needs to be changed. For myself, I'm stepping up and I'm saying, hey, look, I don't like the direction that we're taking our country. I don't like the direction Congress is headed down. And I'm standing up, running on a campaign with a platform saying we need more people in the center. We need more common sense. We need less of the extremes, and we need less of this hyperpartisanship. But I can only do so much, Jay. It also requires individual Americans and voters here in the state of Hawaii also stepping up and saying, I am going to vote and I am going to cast a ballot, voting for change, voting to make a difference, voting to say, look, we need a two-party democracy. The machine shouldn't run everything here in this state. That's the way we change it. It is not easy. It is not going to be a very simple magic bullet, and just if we did one thing,
I remember your time in the city council. You did not easily capitulate.
No.
You're pretty stiff-necked. You were known, in a complimentary way.
Yeah.
You were known for that. And I was going to ask you, how does these various experiences that you listed in 1 minute, how do those experiences make you qualify you for doing the difficult job you're portraying. So we'll take a minute now for a break, if you don't mind, where you and I can think about that, talk offline, and then we'll come back after this break. This is ThinkTech with Charles Djou, candidate for Congress. We're checking in with him in the home stretch. We'll be right back. Stay there.
You're listening to ThinkTech Radio's Technology and Media Wednesday with your host, Jay Fidell of Bendit Fidell Attorneys at Law.
We're back. We're live. We're here in Honolulu in the Davies Pacific Center with Charles Djou, candidate for Congress, checking in with Charles in the home stretch. So, Charles, you really have had a tremendous experience in so many legislative bodies. And as I was going to say, if I didn't get the chance in the last quarter, that really it's a matter of people understanding, including the officials themselves, that government is a business where you have to negotiate. Mm-hmm. You can't take hard positions. You've got to, for the benefit of the greater good, mm-hmm. you've got to reach an accommodation, mm-hmm. a negotiated result. I mean, for example, when the union says to Neil Abercrombie, "We're not negotiating with you. We're out of here."
Yeah.
That's not really so good. Mm-hmm. But you've had so much experience in legislative bodies negotiating and knowing the ropes about negotiating. Mm-hmm. So tell me how you think this helps you in terms of going to Washington.
Well, Jay, I think it's actually a two-step process, and that is, the first thing is you should have a good basic foundation of principles, guiding principles that you believe in, that form your core identity. And for myself, it's a core belief that the people are always right. And it's a belief that the government should always work for the benefit of the people, and that we should be looking at what families are going through and try to help those families. But I think there are too many individuals and too many politicians out there where their core belief is centered not on the people are always right, but centered on, I need to get reelected. And I think that's unfortunate, and that's an aspect of politics. But building upon that core belief is you have to then structure and find solutions to the major problems facing our country today.
Well, it's
you
like
actually have to write the
negotiation in
bills.
general, isn't it?
Yes.
If you have the courage of your convictions, if you have a strong belief in your own position based on those kinds of principles, you're a better negotiator.
Yes.
And you've had
and then working out the details is something. Working the fine points out. That's something that we always should be able to find accommodation, to be able to find compromise, to be able to find the best solution that works for everybody. The problem, I think, with politics today is we've turned that all upside down, and we've turned that completely on its head. And that is, we've lost sight. Too many elected officials have lost sight of their basic core principles, other than I want to get reelected. And then on the fine points and the fine details, they're drawing very firm and hard lines when it comes to crafting legislation here, and nothing gets done. I feel it should be the exact opposite, and that is your principles should never sway. Your principles shouldn't change, and your principles should be grounded in belief in America, belief in democracy. For me, what helps, Jay, is a strong belief in my family, in my marriage and my kids. I say over and over again, and I've said it earlier in the show here, I would far, far rather be married to my wife and father to my kids than a congressman or a state representative or city councilman.
Well, let's drill down a little bit, though, in the interest of time. So here you are, based on principles, careful, thoughtful principles, and you're running as a Republican into a place where the Republicans have taken some hard and conservative positions. How does it all work for you in terms of those platform points? Are you on board the National Republican platform? Do you have differences? Do you agree with Romney? Do you disagree with Romney? What are your positions on the principal issues that are facing our country in the national election for president?
That's a great question here, Jay. I am on board as an advocate for the people of Hawaii. My responsibility is to the people of Hawaii. It is not to my political party. If I have to buck my party, I have no problem doing that. And I think the problem we see in our Congress today is both Republican and Democrats alike are unwilling to buck their political masters in Washington, D.C., and will cast votes and take positions to the detriment of their constituents back home and for the benefit of their political masters in Washington. Why? because that's the best way to ensure re-election.
It's a career move, yeah.
And I think that's unfortunate, that's wrong, and that's what's causing so many problems we have here in Washington, in Hawaii. And I'm running to say that we need to change that here.
Though.
Yeah.
Let's talk about the national debt.
Yes,
Let's talk about the economy and jobs.
Yes. Okay, the national debt, I think, is a perfect example of this gigantic problem that we're facing in our country today. $16 trillion. That's an absolutely astronomical amount here, Jay. Now, I know a lot of your listeners and viewers are really good with numbers and technology, but I think for most people, when I say $16 trillion, people look at me and they see a 16 and lots of zeros after that. Let me drill this down in very personal terms. What $16 trillion means is it's $50,000 for every single man, woman, and child in this country. It works out, if you're a typical family of four, to $200,000
That's more than rail.
Yes. It's much more than rail. And Jay, the reason people need to be concerned about this here is that look around the world. Look what's going on in countries like Greece or Italy or Spain. What happened in each of those nations? They let their spending go out of control. They put everything up on the charge card. And as soon as their national debt started to exceed their gross domestic product, debt got bigger than their income. It's no different when an individual runs up the Visa bill and it becomes larger than their individual income. The debt began to own them instead of the other way around. And today in each of those nations, they're not talking about unemployment at 8%. They're not talking about furlough Fridays or just cutting the growth rate of Social Security. They're looking and staring down unemployment at 25%. They're looking at cutting Social Security. They're looking at closing down schools. They're looking at hope disappearing. And I don't want that to happen in America.
But it is happening, isn't it?
It is, and that's why we have got to elect individuals who are going to work hard to bring America back from that brink. And so, Jay, for me, when I campaign on and when I talk about that we need to balance our budgets, we need a balanced budget amendment, we need to cut out our pork with a line item veto and putting an end to these earmarks here. When I say that, yes, we've got to reduce the size of our federal workforce, I say these things not just because the numbers are important, and they are. It's not just because these policies make sense, and they do. I say these things because if we don't enact these measures here, we are going to go over this fiscal cliff. We are going to be the first generation in American history to leave the next worse off. And I don't want that to happen. I don't want that to occur here in the United States of America.
Well, what happens in Hawaii? You talk about ending pork. Well, Hawaii has largely prospered on pork in the Dan and Inouye years.
Yeah.
We've had, may I say, billions coming in on pork and earmarks and whatnot. I know there's pressure against that. Would you oppose all of that?
Yeah,
because you want to help Hawaii continue in whatever success it's had, right?
Jay, that's a great question because I get asked that all the time. The problem with political pork, Jay, is that you don't just get the pork for your own district. You got to eat the whole pig.
Sure.
It's that whenever you put in political pork projects for Hawaii, you're going to also have to accept the pork projects that go on in North Dakota or in Pennsylvania or in Florida. And what happens here is as a member of Congress, you become compromised. That you say you want this pork project for Honolulu, well, then you also have to look the other way when you have those ridiculous projects that crop up in the other parts of the country. Because what we consider as a benefit to us, that congressman from Pennsylvania or West Virginia or from North Dakota, he or she is going to think that's a beneficial project for their state. And sooner or later, as the saying goes,
catches up.
$1 billion here, $1 billion there, and it soon adds up to a lot of money. And I want to bring it to a larger sense, though, here, Jay, and that is if we continue along the same path of running up record trillion-dollar-plus budget deficits, if we continue to just increase our debt to no end, and our debt now is approaching 99% of our gross domestic product, we are really going to mortgage the future of our children. Jay, my mom and my dad immigrated to the United States. My mom from Thailand, my dad immigrated from China. They did not come to America because we're the land of government programs. They didn't come to America because we're the land of pork barrel projects. They came to the United States because we're the land of opportunity. That this is the country where your future is determined by the size of your dreams. What I'm afraid of here, Jay, is that if we don't change, if we don't vote for change in this upcoming election, for my children and yours, for the next generation, their future is not going to be determined by the size of their dreams, but instead determined by the size of their debt. And I don't want that to happen to my kids or yours, and I don't want that for the future of America.
Okay, what about foreign policy? You have a position, foreign policy, the Middle East, the Near Middle East, Central Asia. You spent some time there, so you must have thought about it a lot.
Yes, sure.
So, there in Congress, what are you going to do about that? That could be very expensive over there.
Yes. Well, on the larger picture, I support and believe that America benefits, Hawaii specifically benefits from an America that is international, that where we work, we have international trade agreements with other democracies around the world. These are positive things. That's why I have championed free trade with South Korea. I champion a free trade agreement with the Philippines. These make sense for our country and will directly benefit us here in Hawaii. Now, on the question of the Middle East, I think it's a good thing that America is looking at pivoting its focus from the Middle East instead to the Asia-Pacific region. That's the future in the 21st century, where a lot of the so-called action is, I think, going to be occurring, both in commerce as well as flashpoints for military action. And I think that's actually going to benefit Hawaii in that we're the center of the Pacific and the crossroads of the Pacific.
You still have to cope with terrorism.
Yeah.
And I heard just yesterday that the latest news about the Libyan attack was that it was nothing other than an attack. It was a terrorist attack. There were no demonstrations in the street. There were just a bunch of guys that were determined to kill the ambassador.
Yeah, unfortunately, Jay, there is still evil in this world. There are individuals out there who hate liberty, who hate freedom, and who hate Americans. And that is something that we also have to be very conscious of here. As much as I want and I believe in the promotion of bilateral trade agreements, as much as I believe that America should be an internationalist country, I also believe in a strong national defense, because I also think that, yes, there is still evil, and there are people who want to do evil to the American people and do evil to liberty. And we can't ever lose sight of that here, that there are just some who benefit from the disruption of democracy and freedom in this world. And we as a nation, I don't see any other nation other than the United States being able to take the point and take the lead.
Can we afford
in
it?
Freedom. Can we afford it? I don't think we can afford not to. I don't think America is the one shining light and has the ability and the power and the wherewithal to make sure that freedom, the light of freedom, doesn't go dark around the world. Now, that doesn't mean here, Jay, that I don't think that the Defense Department can't find some efficiencies and cost savings here. I'm an advocate for making sure we try and balance our budgets. I am an advocate, though, also for a strong national defense. But I don't think the Defense Department is 100% efficient. And I say that as a veteran.
You heard it here.
Yeah.
You heard it here on ThinkTech. The Defense Department is not 100%.
Yeah.
$28 for a gallon of fuel in those recent exercises.
And that's why I say, Jay, as somebody who has served our country in the military, I say this as somebody who is a veteran. I do think the Defense Department, just like all departments in our government, can find greater efficiencies, and we cannot continue the status quo of spend, spend, and spend. And even the Defense Department, too, should look at tightening its belts here and finding ways to save our taxpayer resources here, because simply our nation cannot afford it, our children cannot afford it.
We have to govern smart, don't we?
Yes, absolutely. And you know what? That's something that you, families, businesses all around our country already realize. It's time our government also realize it.
Okay, well, we're going to take a minute here to sort of recalculate. We'll be back for the final home stretch in talking with Charles Djou about the home stretch here on ThinkTech. We're talking with Charles Djou, candidate for Congress. We'll be right back. Stay there.
You're listening to ThinkTech Radio's Technology and Media Wednesday with your host, Jay Fidell of Bendit Fidell Attorneys at Law.
We're back. We're live. We're ThinkTech here in the Davies Building. We're with Charles Djou, candidate for Congress, checking in with Charles Djou in the home stretch. And here we have the home stretch of the show. So, everybody says, Charles, that including the candidates themselves on a national level, the Republicans are more right than they used to be. I mean that in the political spectrum sense. The needle has moved to the right. I think everybody feels that, especially the people on the left.
Yeah.
And my question to you is, where are you in all of that? Are you where Linda Lingle is, because she defines herself in those terms? And Mitt Romney, where are you? And Paul Ryan and all that. Where do you fit on things like the right to life, the right to death, and immigration, and a host of other kind of quasi-moral issues?
Yeah, Jay, You don't have to take my word for it. I view myself as a moderate. I view myself as a pragmatist. I view myself as somebody far more interested in finding solutions than finding political talking points. But you don't have to take my word for it here. Go look at my record here. I'm very proud of the fact that the National Journal ranked me as one of only 10 moderates in the United States Congress when I was there. The National Journal every year ranks all 435 members of Congress, from the far left to the far right. Everybody gets ranked. And during my service there were only 10 who got ranked as a true moderate, and I was one of those 10. And I think that's an unfortunate thing here, Jay. Pat Psyche is the chairman of my campaign, and I really look up to her. She's my mentor.
A lot of people do.
And I think she was a wonderful, outstanding congresswoman for Hawaii and did a wonderful service for our country. When she first got elected to the United States Congress in 1986, I can't remember the exact number, but I think the National Journal had ranked something like 200 out of the 435 members of the United States Congress as a moderate. 200 out of 435 will rank somewhere in the middle. I mean, slightly to the right, slightly to the left, but 200, the majority of the members of Congress were in the middle. Today, that number has gone from 200 down to 10 when I was in Congress. I was one of those 10.
Wow, that's
and now
shocking.
It is. It's shocking and it's disappointing. And now what the people have to decide is, do you think that's a good thing for our country, or do you think it's a bad thing? I think it's a bad thing, because I think we've lost sight of the art of compromise, the art of problem solving. And what has happened here is instead we've got people on the extremes. My opponent in this congressional race got ranked by OpenCongress.org as the 14th most partisan Democrat, the 14th most liberal on the left individual out of 435 members of Congress. And the people in this upcoming election are going to have a very clear and very stark choice. Do you want to elect somebody on the extremes, or do you believe that we need more people in the middle, people who are more interested in solving problems than pointing out problems? And so for me, Jay, the national GOP, I think there are a lot of differences, and I do break ranks with them very frequently here. I broke ranks with my national party more frequently than any other member of Hawaii's congressional delegation during my term in Congress. And that's not something I did intentionally. That's something I did because that's what I believe is right, because I think you got to be a representative of the people first, not a representative of your partisan masters.
Maybe the people are moving right.
Yeah.
If you look at the presidential election, you have the sense that there are a lot of people in a lot of states that are moving right.
Yeah. I will say here, Jay, I do think that fewer and fewer people are voting. And I was raising this point earlier. I will agree that voters are getting more extreme. That the people who are still continuing to vote tend to be more conservative or more liberal and on the extremes.
Yeah.
But the people as a whole, I still think, are in the center. They're in the middle. They are more interested in what's going on with their lives and their family and their communities than they are as what's being talked about on MSNBC or on Fox News.
Yeah.
And so I don't believe that the people are getting more extreme. But what's missing here is fewer and fewer people are actually voting. And that's another aspect here that I want to really strongly encourage all of your listeners, all of your viewers.
What about Congress itself, Charles? I mean, is Congress? I'd like to know from your perspective, is Congress in a dynamic here? What is the dynamic? Mm-hmm. You're thinking about going back there and affecting that dynamic. But what dynamic do you find?
Yeah.
How is it moving? How is it changing?
Yeah. Congress, I think today has become so bitterly corrosive, and that is, you have this poisonous atmosphere between Republicans and Democrats, the far left and the far right, that they seem to go to a holy war on not just one or two, but every issue.
Yeah.
And I when I talk to people, I hear again and again and again that they look on the evening news and all they see is bickering, and they wonder, these Republicans, these Democrats who are over there in Washington, D.C., why can't they ever seem to get along? I might be at work, average individuals, my coworker might be more conservative than me or more liberal than me, but, I can still have lunch with them and I can still agree and work with them. But in Washington, D.C., that's not the case. There's this huge, bright demarcation line between the left and the right who go to war, but the only people who are losing it are the American people and the future of our country. And Jay, I think that's wrong. I believe that needs to change. That's why I'm running for office. That's why I'm standing here or sitting here talking to you.
It's a case
and talking to the people of Hawaii, saying we've got to change that. We've got to end this paradigm
Let's talk
here.
about your personal dynamic.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, nothing
Yeah.
is the same. Although I suppose the French point is the more things change, the more they remain the same. But I think that things are in dynamic. Certainly in this country, look at the last 10 years. So many things have changed. How are you changing, Charles?
Yeah. Well, you know, Jay, I think for myself, on a much more deeper philosophical point, you know, I think, you know, as you grow older, I mean, there are certain things in your life that change you. For myself, clearly the things that have changed me, my marriage, my kids, you know, my children every single day remind me what's important in my life. And that it's not politics, and it's what my kids are doing, and how to raise them as a good parent. And I will say also, though, I think the war has changed me. I don't think anybody can go to war. I don't think anybody can go into combat and not change.
Sure. You must have had moments of great fear over there.
Yeah,
Nobody escapes the risks.
Yeah, you know, Jay, you know, before I went over to Afghanistan, you know, I'd heard frequently from veterans here that you go over there and you have moments of just incredible boredom, but also moments of just incredible experiences here. It's a very experience-dense time. And I didn't really know what that meant until I went over there and served.
What does it mean?
And, you know, for me, it has helped really crystallize for me what's important in life. Because really, when you're dealing with life and death every day, when you see the very best of humanity, the incredible selfless sacrifice executed over there in Afghanistan, but you also see the absolute worst of humanity. You see the most terrible things of what human beings can do to other human beings. I think for me, having come back from that experience over in Afghanistan, I don't treat politics in the same fashion. For me, I think it's much easier for me to prioritize my life and figure out what's important for my family and for my community, instead of getting caught up in the minutia of what may be the story of the day, or in Congress what, you know, particular action item or amendment to a particular bill is. It's very easy to get caught up in that here.
You get lifted somehow.
Yeah.
You're above the fray somehow. You see it in a different way.
Very much so.
So now you're in a fray of another kind here.
Yes.
You're running for office.
Yeah.
Definitely a fray. I mean, I don't think it's been as hard and nasty as some other campaigns we see right now. But I just wonder how you feel about the result. I mean, what will you do if you win? What will your mindset be? What will you do if you lose? What will your mindset be?
Yeah.
So in the last minute or so, tell us about that.
Sure. Well, of course, obviously, I'm looking forward to and I'm working very, very hard to earn the support of the people of Hawaii. If I'm fortunate enough to win, I want the people to know that I am going to work hard every single day to make life better for the people here. You know, for me, serving in public office is this amazing opportunity to wake up every single morning and do something, no matter how small, to make life just a little bit better for my kids and all the families around here in Hawaii. And I want all of your listeners and viewers to know that's exactly the sort of approach that I will take should I be humbled enough to win. And you know what? If I lose, you know, it'll be disappointing. This is something I'm working very, very hard for. But on another level, if I'm unsuccessful in this campaign, I'll still be married to an absolutely wonderful woman. I'll still have 3 amazing children here. And those are the most important things here, not winning or losing any election.
Okay. Yeah. Well, I have one more question that pops up on me, if you don't mind.
Sure.
What did you think of the first debate between President Barack Obama and Mitt Romney? Who won, and what was happening there?
Yeah. Well, you know, in terms of the debate between Romney and Obama, I'm glad they debated. I think it was a healthy thing for the American people to see different viewpoints and different approaches of how both of those gentlemen are going to lead our nation in the future. You know, I have my own views here. I continue to be disappointed at the direction our country is headed in.
You're going to vote for Romney or Obama?
Well, you know, I like a lot of people here in Hawaii, I'm very proud of Barack Obama. I'm excited about the fact that we have a local person in the White House. But after a certain point in time, you know, with unemployment continuing to be too high, the economic growth rate too slow, our national debt too large, you have to change, and you have to hope for something different, not do the same thing over and over again.
Thank you, Charles Djou. On October 22nd, only in a few days from now, you're going to have your own debate with Colleen Hanabusa. Wish you well.
Thank you so much,
Charles.
Hey,
Been great
best
to have
wishes
you
here. Aloha.
Aloha. ThinkTech Hawaii. Try us out tomorrow for Asia in Review with David Day. Aloha.